Hey everybody, back in the car again. You know why? Because I had a 2 to 11 shift, and I have to be back at work at 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock tomorrow, Which means that I need to go to bed as soon as humanly possible. So, I decided to snap this update as quickly as I could out for everyone to hear. So what happened today exactly? Well, it was quite an interesting day, if I'm being honest with you. When I woke up, my sister was with us. I believe it was because she was helping make enchiladas for a Super Bowl party, if I'm not mistaken. And she wanted to go with me and mom to church. So that's exactly what happened. Now, before we left, we decided we wanted to have some waffles. Now, normally when I make waffles, I usually just turn on the heater and then wait until the thing's ready to go and slap the batter in there. But my sister was very concerned about if there was any excess oil in the pan or if it hadn't been properly cleaned yet. So she wanted to give it a deep clean. So I said, okay. And I needed to take a shower while she was doing this, so that's what I did. After the shower was done, I was out in the kitchen and my mom and sister were enjoying these delicious looking pancakes. And we were having a very deep and interesting conversation. I'm not going to get into that now because it was a bit on the personal side. We'll just put it that way. I thought about sharing a little story based on the conversation we had, but my sister was deep and lost in thought from the previous conversation we had before I came in with my little story, which was basically about how instead of being upset about falling down a pit in a game and giving up on it, instead you realize that falling down the pit is part of the learning process and you simply just need to click the jump button to go over the cliff in order to progress through the experience. But because my sister was lost in thought and she said, I gotta be honest, I didn't really hear exactly what you were talking about, I genuinely did feel a little mad about that because I put so much energy and thought into this little anecdote that I put out. So I was a bit on the passive aggressive side by saying, well, my mom actually listened, so I was like, I'm glad you listened. And then my sister was upset with that because she didn't like that I was being passive aggressive. And I will admit that was very immature of me. I should have realized that she was deep in thought and that, respecting that state of mind instead of being mad about it was what I should have done in the first place. And I did apologize, and she seemed to accept my apology, so we worked it out. Then, after all of that, we went straight to church, and throughout the sermon, from what I can remember, it was actually doodling the pastor, as well as just a couple of other random doodles throughout, and just trying to stretch my creative muscles out a bit. Then I kind of got bored with doodling, so I decided to start writing an entry in my journal. And in this journal entry, I was basically just processing this thought in my head about how I kind of get sucked into my little rabbit holes, which is to say, I get sucked into a topic and I want to dig further and further into it, and that can be good, but you also need to have practicality in mind and worthy skills that make you marketable in mind that you should also pursue and make that as much of a driving motivator as your curiosity into these various rabbit holes. And that's something that I really need to realize because I just kind of get sucked into curiosities like UFOs or like paranormal activity, not the movie, just general paranormal activity. And it's fun to dive into those stories, but it's also equally important to ground yourself in your reality and what you can do rather than reacting to what others have been through. And that's what I'm starting to understand, what I need to understand if I want to move forward. I even wrote a little story about it, about how I should see it as like my main goals, practical goals, should be like an island that I'm trying to make like, pilot towards. And then the paranormal stories and the UFO stories are like these fish that I get distracted by, that I look down at and I'm like, look at those fish, they're so cool. And then because I'm not manning the boat or the sails, a storm comes and it kind of gets me into a little whirlwind, and then I'm shot back to where I started. And then I have to do the whole trip all over again from the start because I didn't strengthen my navigation muscles. So that was basically the story I came up with, and I think it was very valuable, very good insights indeed. After all of that, it was time to go back home, and I had about a few good 2 hours before needing to go to work again. So I wanted to show my sister this cool documentary by one of my favorite YouTube channels, Jesse Michaels, about severely autistic children who apparently have telepathic capabilities of communicating with their mothers. And it seems that the key thing that makes that possible is love and trust and kindness. Like pure love, trust, and kindness. And because of that, these severely autistic nonverbal children are able to communicate with their mothers on a much deeper, more profound level than thought possible. And it definitely makes you think. It gives you insight into the human condition. And I did talk about this in a much earlier video, but I'm talking about showing this video to my sister. And my mom was talking about how she wanted to know why I was so interested in this. And it was for the reasons I said. It's because it gives you insight into a piece of the human condition that we are unfamiliar with. And it makes us appreciate things that we don't understand, but we should try to understand. I mean, this whole telepathic thing could be the Helen Keller moment, but for severely autistic nonverbal children, who are, of course, will eventually grow up into nonverbal autistic adults. But yeah, the sooner we can research this, the better, because I think it opens gateways to new possibilities. Moving on, my sister didn't really watch it, if I'm being honest. She was mostly on her phone and chatting with someone, which, I mean, I understand. I'm not going to force her to watch something if she's not interested, obviously. And the video was very long. It's just, I suggested, she agreed, and she didn't watch it, but it's fine. Then I had to get ready for work, and I almost forgot. For breakfast, I had a piece of pie and ice cream and coffee. And also, gosh, what else did I have? The waffles? I already talked about that. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I drove to work, and when I finally got to work, it was so busy. It was the busiest day of the year, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, so far. And the funny thing is, it was all because of the Super Bowl. But as soon as the Super Bowl really got into high gear, around the third or fourth hour of being at work, it was dead as a doornail. There was nobody there. So, pro tip, if you want to shop for groceries and don't want to wait in long lines and have plenty of options open to you, go to a grocery store while everyone's watching the Super Bowl game. There was practically nothing in the front to do because all the check stands were taken up by the other courtesy clerk coworkers. And so I had to wipe windows to, do something while also passing the time until I went back home for lunch. Yeah. Oh, and started the day off karting, but I needed a co-karter to help me out. And I had a really good co-karter who we both worked really well together. After wiping the windows for a good hour, I think, I was doing a little dancing to kind of make the time fly by as I was wiping the windows. And that's something I love doing at work, just having fun and enjoying myself so I don't feel like it's a complete and total wash. Especially interacting with my coworkers and the customers and getting insights into their thought processes and their characters and their lives is something that makes the day go by lickety-split. Because it gives you just a better insight into life. So yeah, I went home, and for lunch I had steak that we cooked last night. It was refrigerated, so I had to chop it up into tiny bits and then warm it up on a pan for 4 minutes in medium-low heat. and it was very good. After eating this, while watching a Jesse Michaels documentary with this guy, like the author of a book called Communion, where this dude apparently had an experience with an extraterrestrial abduction, it was time to go back to work. My mom and our family friend were going to watch the show called Severance, but I said I wanted to watch it with them because I've heard very good things about this show. So they agreed to hold off and find another show to watch until I was there to watch it with them. Then I drove back home, to work, and the last 4 hours were very dead, like very few customers. It was crazy. But I did talk about the telepathy tapes and those individuals, part of that experience with one of my managers who found it very fascinating. I asked them if they had that ability, what would they do with it? And they said that they would use it to read the mind of their significant other, which I thought was very funny. And finally, just had a really long conversation with one of my other coworkers about stocks, investing, interest rates, adult stuff like that you should wrap your mind around if you have any chance of having a decent savings by the time you retire. So, very insightful and engaging conversation about that. Finally, it was the last few minutes where I wiped down the check stand and said goodbye to my manager, drove home, and as soon as I got home, I recorded this. And that is practically my day in a nutshell. Yeah, hope you enjoyed watching, and I will be updating tomorrow. Take care, everybody, and have yourselves a wonderful night, or day, or whatever time you're watching this. Bye.